Andrea Sneiderman's attorneys lashed out at cops during her perjury trial today for what they consider multiple mistakes made in the investigation into her husband, Rusty Sneiderman's murder. Detective Andy Thompson testified that he failed during the investigation in several ways, from not looking into Andrea Sneiderman's cell records to waiting weeks to interview her former boss, who was eventually convicted of Rusty's murder. The Sneiderman's charged with 13 felony counts, including perjury and making false statements to police. So let's bring in HLN legal correspondent Gene Casares, who's been following the trial from the very beginning. It's taking place just outside of Atlanta. And Gene, what other blunders do the defense think cops made, and how could they impact this case?
Well, first of all, let's start from the beginning. Do you remember shortly before Hemi Newman actually murdered Rusty Sneiderman, there was that mystery man that was to the side of their home, and he was by the air conditioner, and he had his fake mustache. They never investigated that. That's one thing. I think you hit another nail on the head in regard to Andrea Sneiderman's cell phone. They never took it to look at emails. And in the questioning, and that's what jurors are listening to today, the interviews that Andrea Sneiderman did with the lead detective, one being just a day after her husband was killed. And she initially says, when they ask, is there anybody that was trying to break up your marriage? And she says, Hemi Newman. But then the questioning does not veer farther, and the question is not asked of her, were you having an affair? Now, prosecutors are saying she veered it away from that, trying to look at everybody else that could be responsible. But the role of the investigator, the responsibility to ask the pertinent questions, they did not. The defense really gained a lot today, I think, by focusing on investigators not looking at what they needed to look at. And this impacted the Hemi Newman trial, too. Ultimately, it didn't in a sense. He was found guilty, but mentally insane. But it definitely could impact this case.
Okay, so they're talking about how cops made mistakes. But this trial is all about what she said on the stand, which may or may not have been the truth, and also statements that she made to police. So how do they think police not asking the right questions or doing the right kind of investigation impacts whether or not impacts the charges that are against her in this trial?
Well, I guess the false statements, can they prove their false statements since the interviews did not press her on answers? Some of the answers are clearly false, we believe, based on the evidence, and especially statements made in court, right, based on the testimony of other witnesses. So maybe, Ryan, it won't impact this trial as much as people think it will, but it definitely, I think now we realize why party to a crime for murder, those charges were dismissed shortly before this trial began. They didn't have the evidence.
Makes sense. All right, Gene, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.